like to introduce my fellow presenter, Aine, who's a research associate from MECS, who'll be presenting today, and you will hear from a little later. I just thought I'd double check about the recording, and the recording site today is fantastic. 3 months ago, in our first webinar in the series, we heard from Tony at Burn and Dorcas at PowerUp. Many of you may have been part of that webinar. I think they gave us a fascinating window into how they do research in their companies, and why they and their colleagues really value the user insights and the user research that they do and what they get from it. As part of that session, we held a little poll at the end, and we asked what you'd like us to cover in future webinars in the series, and you did tell us a few things. So you told us that you would like to hear about research from the field and kind of listening to customers. You'd like to learn from cooks themselves. You'd like us to focus on field research to do deep dives into a single method, and you'd like to hear your story. So we will be addressing these requests over the next 2 webinars, in this webinar today and in the next webinar in a few months' time. In today's session, Aine from MECS will be presenting findings from 4 ethnographic studies that were conducted in Ghana, Kenya, Nepal and Uganda, and this was focused on observing cooking-related electricity consumption behaviours in 103 households. The aim of these studies was to shed light on the conditions under which households use electricity for cooking, what they do to save electricity, and which actions lead to energy wastage. In a few months' time, I will tell you about the ethnographic research that the User Insights Lab did in Nairobi back in October last year, and that was with electric pressure cooker users. So think of this as a 2-part series. Today's multiple reverse, taking you through things in 3 months' time. Right? So without further ado, over to Aine to take you through her presentation.
Thank you, Matthew, for a wonderful introduction. So yes, this session today is going to be slightly different from the previous one. So MECS has recently conducted studies in 4 countries with the help of local organizations, trying to understand how those who already adopted clean cooking, how do they use them in their daily lives? And we received a wealth of insights. And so I wanted to dedicate this session to share these insights with you so you can then apply them in your work, or just for you to have a better understanding of how people cook with electricity. So the key takeaways from today, so what are you going to learn, is what Matthew already mentioned. We're going to talk a little bit about data collection method, rapid ethnography, because this was conducted. Then I'm going to shed light on the reasons why people choose e-cooking, so why people cook with electricity in households that were visited. How do household cooking spaces or kitchen spaces look like? Then most important and kind of the key focus of the studies, electricity wasting and saving behaviors, reasons for fuel stacking, so people fuel stack in most of the households, and why do they do that? Also, what are the requirements for e-cooking appliances that we heard from users? And also, so I wanted to finalize this presentation not with the regular recommendations, but with behavior change determinants. So the conditions in which behaviors happen. So for you later can think of your own solutions and recommendations from everything you've heard today. So just diving into this, how did this all start? So energy inefficient cooking practices can increase electricity consumption by more than 3 times the amount needed to complete the cooking task. So this was a study conducted by our colleagues at Loughborough University Design School on the way people cook, and really focusing on electricity consumption. And we've done a lot of studies at MECS where we did control cooking tests and found out that, of course, electric appliances are much more energy efficient, but the way the people use them at home, we cannot control them, right? People can, leave them unattended, put the highest power setting, and do things as they wish. And of course, this can increase electricity consumption. So really, this affordability of cooking with electricity depends not only on the efficiency and characteristics of appliances, but also on the daily behavior of their users. As I mentioned, really, the cost, so multiple studies of MECS showed in the past that the cost of, for example, cooking with an EPC, which is one of the most energy efficient appliance, is approximately 1/3 of the cost of using LPG and less than 20% of the cost of using charcoal. But that's not necessarily true in uncontrolled kitchen environment, right? So before starting this study, we're thinking, okay, so how do people cook, right? How do they actually use electricity in their daily lives? Because this inefficient electricity consumption behavior can increase their electricity bills and perhaps discourage them from continuing to use e-cooking appliances and maybe even prompting to return to traditional fuels, right? So we wanted to really see, and the aim of the study was first to observe these cooking behaviors that lead to either increased electricity consumption or also see how households respond to that, right? So what do they do to save electricity? Also to define these determinants for behavior change interventions and e-cooking product improvements, and eventually to really support that more energy efficient cooking practices and enhance the adoption and sustained use of e-cooking appliances among the users in the global south. So really the focus was on seeing how people use electricity for cooking, with a specific focus on how much energy they consume and what behaviors cause that. So this is all I'm going talking about later on. So the sample of these 4 studies was 103 households, as Matthew already mentioned. So they were grid-connected households, so 25 each in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda, 28 in Nepal. And we wanted to have an equal representation of low, middle, and high income cooks from a range of geographical locations, so rural, peri-urban, and urban areas. So we have the socio-economic range and range of geographical locations, because we really wanted to see what kind of devices high and middle income households have versus low income households, as you can see in these images, and how their kitchen spaces look like, where do they keep those devices, whether they cook indoors or outdoors, and all these sort of things. So really wanted to have that range of different households, just to understand really what's out there on the ground. Then I had the slide to show that the previous study done by colleagues in Loughborough about the electricity consumption, then the hypothesis about the affordability of cooking depending also on user behavior, previous studies by MECS of how energy efficient appliances are much more efficient than charcoal and LPG when it's done in a controlled environment, and how different it can be also that people when people cook at home, and that can increase their electricity bills and prompt to return to traditional fuels, and that's what we wanted to see. The aims of the study: to observe, to define, to support. Then we had the sample of 103 grid-connected households, and this is, I think, where I stopped, and you probably the most visual one worth seeing now. So can you see the slide, just to confirm?
We can, yeah, I can see.
Yes.
Perfect. So yes, so appliances in kitchen spaces really vary across high, middle, and low income households, and this is what we wanted to observe. So the study locations where Ghana, Kenya, Nepal, and Uganda, as already mentioned, and these studies were conducted by our partners. So Qualiquant Services Limited were conducting study in Ghana. Meiji Africa conducted a study in Kenya, and this is also just to mention an organization that works a lot in informal settlements. So you can also see Madara Informal Settlement to be included in this study as well, because Yatra collected data in Nepal, and an interesting fact is that they focused specifically on induction cookstove users. So all the households that they visited had an induction cookstove because of their previous work with the NREP, Nepal's Renewable Energy Program, in 2 provinces. And final essay was conducted in Uganda by Dahlberg Research Limited, also focusing on various municipalities, including the capital and other peri-urban, including peri-urban and urban area and rural areas. So it was really a range of geographical locations covered across the 4 countries. So the method was a mixed method approach with consistent methods used in each country. So the same process was followed. So the study started with semi-structured entry interviews with participating cooks to unfold perceptions, to observe how many and what type of cooking appliances they use, what they think about cooking, and so on. Then it was followed by rapid ethnography. So it was a 1 day of participant observation, attending at least 2 cooking events. That was normally done on the same day as the semi-structured interview. That was followed by 1 week of energy monitoring and self-reporting via WhatsApp. So at the end of the rapid ethnography, enumerators were plugging the main cooking device into an energy meter, and then the household cooks had to monitor energy consumption throughout the week and then report it to enumerators via WhatsApp, including also any other insights of their experience and behaviors. And the final step was at the end of the study, semi-structured interviews with participating cooks just to understand how it went, what was their perception, what energy monitoring showed, and what they think about e-cooking after the study. An interesting, I think, thing to mention was that some participants didn't have access to mobile phones, especially in low-income households, and also women of the house sometimes don't have a mobile phone. So that was addressed by giving them pen and paper diary templates, and then kind of providing it as an alternative so people can still record step by step every day what and how they cook, how much energy they consume, and then just hand that in at the end of the study to enumerators for data analysis. So that was kind of a tech, more user-friendly format was also used. So talking about this rapid ethnography, so rapid ethnography can last as little as few hours, differently from the normal ethnography, which can last days or months. And this rapid ethnography is only enabled because of the very, very specific focus, right? So it helps to save money, it helps to save time, but you really need to be very well prepared for the study. So in the case of these studies, enumerators that were collecting the data, they had a very precise checklist of electricity saving behaviors that need to be observed. And the next slide is going to be about wasting behaviors. So they were given this list that was also consistent, done through, it was a literature review findings, but also contribution from the partners that collected data in each country. So these electricity saving behaviors included using energy saving appliances, tracking cooking time, using appropriate heat setting for the task, switching appliances off before the food is fully done, so really letting that residual heat complete the cooking, staying close to the appliance during use, matching cookware size to burner size, using lids or pans on pans or pots to retain heat, preparing ingredients in advance to reduce the time for when the appliance is on, chopping ingredients in small pieces before cooking, cooking in batches to minimize repeated appliance use, using other fuels, and also using alternatives to cooking. So either using pre-cooked ingredients or eating raw vegetables, eating cold food without reheating, or could be also eating out. So these were electricity saving behaviors to observe. And the other list was the electricity wasting behaviors, which are mostly just mirrored with some very few exceptions, like using energy instead of time, like defrosting in a microwave or cooking beans without soaking. So this all has been combined together with research organizations and based on literature review findings as well. So enumerators had that list, and they had to just to identify which of these behaviors were observed and just give a bit more qualitative details on each of that behavior. So moving to findings, before that, I wanted just to kind of show and give a background on electrification rates in each of the studied country. So access to electricity varies quite a lot between countries, with Nepal having the highest access rate and Uganda having the lowest access rate. But I think what's the most interesting in these numbers is the use of electricity as a primary cooking fuel. So the last column that shows that is in most of the countries is only 0.5% of people that use electricity as a primary cooking fuel. And this is it's always, we have to look at these numbers very carefully because and with caution, because even though, as you can see, for example, in Ghana, the use of electricity as a primary cooking fuel is only 0.5%. The study by MECS that's been done in 2022 found out that actually 84% of urban cooks in Ghana use e-cooking appliances at least once a week. So even though if people don't consider electricity as a primary cooking fuel, it's usually integrated in a household cooking fuel mix and is used alongside other fuels. So even though these numbers look very low, electricity, we've seen a lot of electric cooking appliances in these households, and the use is much more widespread than the numbers show. So in terms of what type of cooking appliances people use, so we've seen 15 different types of e-cooking appliances in households across the 4 countries. And looking at the numbers, so the number one appliance that was used in the majority of the households was an electric kettle, and also the microwave following. Then the hot plate or the coil stove. Then, of course, induction cook stove is very high on the list because all households in Nepal had one because of the nature of the study. We've also seen quite a lot of pressure cookers, 24 in total, and rice cookers. And also at the end of the list, you can see that there was even an immersion water heater, the fufu cooker. Some of the devices are very niche, and I was actually pretty surprised to see such a long, varied list of appliances used in households, since the studies were not focused on any specific appliance in particular, and we just wanted to really see what's the range. So just looking, at the visuals, and so we saw appliances like Eco by Burn, so like a very modern, energy saving. A lot of households own these dual fuel stoves, so where either 2 or 3 burners are LPG and one or two burners are electric. So these were very common in Kenya and in Uganda. We've also seen one halogen oven in Ghana, something that's also not very usual, not very common to see, and quite a few of these the countertop oven / air fryers of like a smaller size. And what was really interesting also to observe in quite a lot of houses, especially the low income and informal settlements, people use handmade coil stoves. So they don't have any temperature control, and they are purely handmade, normally in the settlement. And they're actually pretty dangerous, and they normally they are and cause fires, and pretty dangerous to have at home. And an interesting an interesting story was that during the data collection in informal settlement in Kenya, one of the houses caught on fire, one of the participant houses, and so nobody got hurt, and they were even able to carry out the study after they sorted everything out to really show the resilience. But it wasn't clear whether the fire was caused by one of these coils, but it happens, and this is what can cause it as well. So it just shows the need for high quality appliances, because people want to use them, and to really have access to safe and efficient e-cooking appliances, something that's really needed. And talking about kitchen spaces, so I think being a designer and trying to understand how people, not only how people use appliances, but where they stay in their houses, we took some time also analyzing kitchen spaces. So in middle and high income households, they typically have dedicated kitchen spaces. In low income households, cooking was often done in the same space that's used for other household activities. Cooking activities were frequently timed to avoid overlapping with other household chores. So that's another kind of layer of complexity in using cooking devices and cooking in general. Then some adapted spaces included verandas, metal containers, part of the living room, balconies, or hallways in houses, and kitchen utensils and other materials were stored in stackable containers or in rooms separate from the cooking areas. So taking a look at some of the pictures, so kitchens with dedicated spaces in Uganda and Kenya. So some are a bit more neat, some are less, but these were dedicated for cooking, so people can see more appliances, more electric appliances have in their kitchens. Then in lower income households, cooking was often done in the same space with other household activities, which limited that separation between cooking and other daily tasks. So you can see, well, maybe children play here, and there is also cooking happening, and a lot of utensils and different containers around. And it was probably one of the most interesting findings that because of this restricted size of the kitchens, and there's really kind of, you see, it's really cluttered, many users prefer to own a single multifunctional appliance than multiple specialized ones. And you really can imagine why, because if the space is restricted, they rather prefer, for example, to have a rice cooker that can make rice, soup. We're even going to see people frying eggs in it, rather than having something that only can do one dish or one service. Okay, and moving on, why do households choose e-cooking, right? So what were the reasons that people really appreciated? In all the households we visited, they used electricity as a primary cooking method. So first of all, they really praised the consistent fuel availability. So, electricity doesn't need to be collected, prepared, weighted, and brought home from somewhere. So that was something that they really valued. Then was low cost of cooking. So those households with energy efficient appliances noticed that cooking with electricity, it's cheaper than cooking with other fuels, especially in countries like Uganda, where charcoal became very expensive recently. They really see that cooking with electricity is cheaper. Then the speed of cooking. So again, no fire needs to be started. Often cooking, just electric cooking allows you to start a dish by pressing a button. And especially busy urban cooks, they notice that they can just wake up in the morning, heat up their water very quickly and go to work, or heat up breakfast, and that was really, really valued. Advanced appliance features was another thing. So those households who had, let's say, induction cookers with automated features, either timers or temperature control, or integrated menus in the control buttons, they really valued those features that help them save time. And the following point, increased confidence. So again, Those appliances allow people to be sure that the food is not going to get burned, and they can even multitask and do other household duties and still make sure that the food is going to be up to the quality that they want. Versatility of meals. So we've seen actually multiple times in these studies that those people who adopted e-cooking, they are more likely to experiment in the kitchen, to cook modern recipes like KFC chicken or spaghetti, you know, kind of moving away from the very traditional heavy meals. And this is what they see the electric cooking be perfect for. And the final point would be modernizing kitchens. So people were very happy to see that their kitchens are clean, free from soot, their clothes are clean. There were even ladies being happy about being able to get their nails done and not to ruin them while they cook. So these and I guess many other points that we could name why people choose to e-cook. And so one of the example was it was Lady Ruby Khatun from Nepal. So after buying an induction cook stove, she no longer needs to refill a gas cylinder at the local shop, and because she doesn't have a male family member in her house, this was a very physically demanding job that she doesn't need to be doing, right? So electricity comes straight into her house. So that also shows the empowerment of single women-only households. And again, talking about this modernization, and again, the insight that was seen quite a few times, that electricity enables various cooking methods that are difficult or not possible with other fuels. So, for example, people can bake in an oven multiple dishes at the same time, or reheat them in the microwave, like a dish that is already assembled and doesn't need to be kind of heated up in separate entities. And there was one user that used electricity for deep frying, so really to heat it, that allowed him to heat an oil to a certain temperature that really makes the food crisp and well cooked. And this was actually that the added value of electricity, that it can provide that service that other fuels cannot, was really the insight that we've seen quite a few households across the whole countries. Okay, and moving on to energy saving behaviors. So again, so the list that I presented at the beginning of this presentation, of course, this wasn't a quantitative study because we had a fairly small sample. This was a qualitative study, but I just wanted to show the size of some of these behaviors that and highlight ones that most of the households used alternative fuels. So the fuel stacking was very present, and people really switched to other fuels, either to save electricity or for other reasons. I'm going to talk a little bit more about fuel stacking later on. Then people, most of the people were using lids and stayed close to cooking appliances during use. So had some visuals from Ghana of how people added extra layer of aluminium foil to save electricity while they cook. They were also cooking multiple dishes in the same appliance, or bulk cooking, preparing ingredients by chopping them in small pieces before they turn the appliance on. So that also helped to not to waste electricity by keeping the appliance on for too long or unnecessarily long. We have also observed that users keep their sockets or switched off, or appliances unplugged, and turn them on only immediately before the using an appliance. That was also avoiding appliances to get ruined during the power surges. So it was a very common behavior. And talking about the electricity wasting behavior. So, well, we've seen quite a lot of inefficient appliances, and of course, people leave them unattended to go and do other household tasks, so kind of multitask, right? So so that would probably be the highlights of these electricity wasting behaviors. And so many households in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda were using these old and inefficient cooking appliances, and we've seen quite a lot of those that kind of are not energy efficient and really use more energy to perform a cooking task. And that is because multitasking is, of course, a behavior that kind of comes from traditional cooking, but because of energy saving appliances and automated appliances like induction cookers, this can actually be enabled, like the multitasking. So this lady from Nepal, she chose an induction cooker because of its automated features that enables multitasking during meal preparation, and this transition saved her a lot of time. So she can put a meal on, and then she can continue on with her household duties, knowing that the food is going to get ready and the appliance is going to turn off automatically. So I already mentioned that the traditional cooking, and because most of these households, they either grew up with traditional cooking methods or they were using traditional cooking methods before switching to electricity. And so this was so cooking on an open fire or charcoal was valued for its long, slow cooking process, which was believed to enhance the flavor of food. And this behavior was carried over to e-cooking, where many cooks leave appliances unattended to tend to other tasks, allowing cooking time to go unmonitored. So people with like the previous slide with induction cook stoves, they can do that, but people with just, let's say, a hot plate, if they leave it unattended, that leads to unnecessary energy waste and maybe the food getting burned. And what was interesting was actually we've seen people valuing that slow cooking process that I mentioned here, and valuing that enhanced flavor of food. That's not the flavor of smoke, but it's actually just the flavor that comes from the slow cooking, where all the flavors get unified. So they really value that slow, long cooking process that then has been brought to e-cooking, because they would like to mimic the same thing, the same flavor in e-cooking. And what was also interesting, and I think you've seen in many pictures before, that people often put e-cooking appliances on the floor, which is similar to how they used to cook with three-stone fire or charcoal stoves, right? When a cook stove goes on the floor, and we've seen this in quite a lot of households, that just knowing that these appliances are corded, they pose like an extra risk for household members where they can trip, and so that was also an interesting thing to see how people still prefer cooking on the floor, even if they use the modern cooking appliances. Okay, I see that I have probably, well, because my slides were not working, so I don't have too much time, because we still want to have some time for questions, right? Matthew, do you think I should continue for another 5 to 10 minutes, so we still have
I would suggest another 5 minutes. We've got probably 8 to 9 questions, so there's some really nice engagement in the chat, and I'd love to kind of throw those in your direction. But yeah, keep going for another 5, and then we can, if you can, and then we can discuss some of these questions, and then maybe you can cover up anything else that's in the presentation that you can't speak to.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to cover this 1 week of energy monitoring, which I think is quite interesting, and then I'm gonna give it back to you, Matthew, because I think the questions are really worth answering. So the 1 week of energy monitoring was when the main cooking device was monitored for energy usage by plugging into an energy meter for 1 week. So the main aim of this was that, okay, so we observed the behaviors, and then we're going to measure how much energy is consumed, and we tried to match which of these behaviors lead to the most electricity wastage or saving, right? But of course, because on the days where we did the observations, maybe cooks were not cooking the same meals as on the other day, so they were not really exactly possible to match. But some very interesting insights came from here. So hang on. So in terms of the quantitative data, so most of the households, it consumed less than 1 kilowatt hour per day cooking with their main cook stove, with their main appliance. But while some use aware of household electricity consumption, particularly those in Ghana and Uganda, because they use the prepaid energy meters, most of the users, they were often unaware of the proportion that was used for cooking, right? So this energy monitoring was really the eye-opening exercise. So it's really helped cooks understand the links between time and energy. So the longer you have the appliance on, the more energy it consumes. Then, for example, in Uganda, 60% of participants reported choosing to cook more with electricity after seeing how little energy these electric appliances actually consumed. In Kenya, participants praised this energy monitoring exercise for revealing that electricity is relatively inexpensive. And of course, in Nepal, induction cookstove users were least surprised by energy meter readings because they have already observed, because they all had energy efficient induction stoves, that they already saw that their electricity bills are not significantly affected. And of course, this, we noticed that to save electricity, some cooks have made immediate changes in their behavior after this energy monitoring. So they either switched to an EPC because they already had it in their households. They chose faster cooking foods like rice, started preparing ingredients before switching appliances on, avoided energy-intensive methods like deep frying, so they even altered their menus, and used other fuels like charcoal or gas for dishes requiring longer cooking times. And so for example, one cook in Ghana discovered that keeping the lid on the rice cooker allows the steam to cook the food more efficiently. And we also observed that people who use microwaves realized that these appliances consume a significant amount of energy, prompting some to switch to hot plates or reheating, or to use charcoal for warming leftovers. So these are all, of course, just people's perceptions of how, and not the quantitative measure of the efficiency of certain appliances. But I think I'm going to stop here, Matthew. Okay, so we still have 15 minutes, and I'm sure there is going to be quite a lot of questions from what I already spoke.
Fantastic. Thank you for a great presentation. And let me just go through some of these questions. And so first question from Micah. You said that cooking uses electricity. You said that cooking using electricity, e.g. EPC, can cost only 1/3 of what it would cost to use LPG. Is this comparison between the electricity price for on-grid cooking? Because for off-grid rural solutions, they would need to purchase a solar panel to produce this themselves, which has a significant upfront cost. Just a clarification question, is the larger part of people having no access to clean cooking solutions live in rural off-grid areas? And so do you think e-cooking has a place for off-grid rural regions? So that's, taking into account the upfront cost, for example, of solar.
Yes, these are a couple of questions I see. Yeah, so this was the study that's been done by MECS in the past. I can refer that to you about, so this was in a controlled environment, and it was used the grid electricity, and off-grid was not considered here. But the off-grid, so if you're asking if the initial price of like solar panels or installation is considered, it's not. It's just the price of cooking, and I can refer that to the study, so you can see the details there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that'd be the best next step on that, is to refer to the studies. Okay, question from Conjit. Why is access? We saw earlier on that access to electricity is high in some countries, yet the use of electricity as a primary cooking fuel remains low. What are the alternatives, and why are they preferred, if the study covered that? So is that something that you covered?
Yeah, I mean, when these studies are done, when the data is collected and they ask, what is your primary cooking fuel? People don't necessarily say electricity, even if they've done some of their cooking with electricity, right? So we saw that maybe the clean cooking mix is 30%, so they they use LPG, they use electricity. They still maybe consider, they have a charcoal stove, they still consider that they cook a lot with charcoal, and maybe that's their primary. So it's really depends on how you formulate that question when you do a study like that. And so I think that was what I covered in that slide about why that percentage is so low is really of how the data was collected to define that primary cooking fuel.
I think I might just add to that, I know that things like cost of electricity, cost per unit, perceived quality of the infrastructure. I think there's like 8 to 10 at least that would explain the difference between, for example, I think it was Uganda Uganda has the lowest percentage, but in terms of electricity assets, but the highest percentage of primary usage. So I don't have the detail in front of me, but I would imagine, and just thinking up to my study, I think 8 to 10 factors explain the reason for those differences. And it's a very good question, very interesting question. Another question from Camille, why have you not included open register electric stoves in your study?
Can you define the open register electric stoves?
Yeah, I don't know if Camille can clarify.
Yeah. Just the open registers are like which households can easily maintain them by themselves. That's what we are using here in Ethiopia. And I just guess that there is a possibility of using this kind of stoves. Open resistors. I have seen in the picture the coiled ones, but the one which are called are different.
So we didn't exclude or include anything. We just went to the households and tried to see what people use, just to kind of have that range. So would be I had at the end of the slides, I had some study limitations and some recommendations how this study can be improved. So this could be one of the ways that you suggest. But we were not excluding or including particularly any appliances, electric cooking appliances.
Right, and you weren't recruiting on that basis, right? You were recruiting, as you said at the start, on balancing across socio-economic group, balancing across rural, urban, peri-urban. Okay, brilliant. Next question. Food culture has a part to play. The type of food and time in the morning cooking usually overlaps with other chores, and this in a way increases the time the stove's idle. Did you notice any cooking behaviours related to multitasking at different times of the day? So the example given, chores and cooking.
Yeah, in fact, there was one of the and I can show it just this to this question was that it was very interesting to see that lunch was the most energy intensive cooking, and dinner was actually even lower than breakfast, and it was for different reasons. So maybe for people who are using more traditional cooking methods, right? So maybe they were turning their charcoal stove because they had more time. So of course, then the electricity consumption is lower because electric cooking appliance is not in use. In lunch, I noticed that people used a lot of microwaves. So maybe they still had the food that they were reheating from yesterday. So they were maybe popping home during lunch time from work and during that, just the heating up of the food. And during breakfast, there was everybody who had a kettle were using a kettle. And I had this next slide where I wanted to show, just the breakfast is normally warming up water or maybe quickly something in the microwave. Lunch is normally something faster as well. But mostly breakfast and lunch includes an electric cooking device. And dinner, we saw some people, using maybe because they had more time, they felt like, oh, maybe they can switch off their charcoal stove or then they cook a longer meal, like we can see in this photo. Also with a more efficient electric cook stove. So it was various the behaviors, and I think this was a very interesting question, that we saw this different electricity consumption between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe I'll stop here.
Brilliant. No, that's really helpful, and a really helpful like visual to sort of answer that question as well. Right, next question is an AI note taker, so I'll move on from that. Next is from Sarita. So though access to electricity in Nepal is high, the main use of electricity remains limited for light purpose in most rural areas, and the quality and reliability of electricity distribution infrastructure matters the most. Majority of the rural households have 5 amp electricity meter, which is not sufficient to operate electrical appliances of 1500 to 2000 watt. And in addition to cooking technology and compatible utensils, upgrading of household wiring, electricity meter upgrading remains challenging. Any thoughts? So a lot of that, I think, will help. Some of that, much of that addresses that earlier question of the difference between access and primary usage, I believe. But the question specifically from Sarita was, any thoughts on this and how to solve it?
Well, this is very much on point. I think the person who asked read the report of the Nepalese study, because that's the identified amper. And also the further slides, I was going to talk a little bit about this wiring that that's not suitable often for electric cooking, and the households that that obtain these induction cookstoves had to improve their wiring. So yeah, and this is Matthew, this is what you are, and I think I was supposed to cover that also in the fuel stacking section. That on one hand, this the wiring issues and the also often or sometimes unstable electricity connection, then also requires people to have a backup fuel, and also that's why the numbers that we've seen in electrification rate and access to and cooking with electricity are relatively low. Did I answer? There was quite a lot of information in that question.
I don't know if Sarita would be able to just confirm if you got the answer you're looking for. We've got a few more minutes and a few more questions, so if you want to confirm, and then we can jump on to the next one. Okay, fine. I'll move on to Camille. So another question for Camille. In addition to the field testing, do we have any lab test results for the 15 e-cooking appliances?
No, so we didn't do any control testing, laboratory testing. We only did observations in the people's houses.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Mika. So observation, the average daily household electricity consumption that was around and below 1 kilowatt a day. How many people were part of these households, as it's very different for a 4-member household versus an 8-member household? And was this for all their meals or just one meal a day, for example?
So answering for the number of people in the household, most of the studies included between 4 and 7 people in households. So that I would say it's the average of those. And in terms of number of meals, so it really depends on an appliance, because we instructed enumerators to connect the main cooking appliance. So for example, in some houses that could be an induction stove, but in other houses could be a kettle. So let's say if kettle is used in the morning, maybe it's not necessarily used in the afternoon or evening, because maybe a household only has a kettle. So that also really depends on an appliance. If it was a hot plate, probably it's used twice a day. If let's say it's a kettle, maybe it's also used twice a day. So I would say 1 or 2 meals a day, if I have to summarize. So 4 to 6 people in a household and 1 or 2 meals a day.
Okay, brilliant. I think that answers that question. And then the final question in the chat is, well, there was one more just come in, but taking the last question. Are the stoves provided by you, or have they already been used by the community?
So they have already been used by a community, acquired by different means. So we did not give them any appliances. We just observed what they've already had. And so all these appliances were used for at least 8 months in those households. Some were been used for much longer. So they were their appliances that they use in daily lives. Yeah.
Right. Fine. Brilliant. And then next question was just clarification. Were these low, middle, or high income households? And they're not sure if this was addressed. I think you did cover that. Maybe just want to revisit that, but I think you did cover that off.
Yeah, so that was really the range, and we wanted to observe low, middle income, and high income households.
Fantastic.
So wanted to have an equal representation. Yeah.
So that's all the questions we had. If there's anything else you wanted to see, we rushed into the chat. Was there anything else we've got a few minutes left, 3 minutes left? So if there's anything else you wanted to kind of go back to in your slides, just while we've got time.
Yeah, I see that there's quite a lot, and I still had quite a few slides to go through. Maybe it would be nice just for me to share that presentation with the audience so they can take a look themselves. Just to mention that all this is based on 4 reports. So there are 4 reports that I've already published on MECS website, so you can read details about each country. And we've also recorded a podcast with representatives from each organization that are talking about these studies and more about like stories of users and cooking habits. And so we understand that there is a lot of insights that came from the study, and there's like a lot to cover in 1 hour or so.
Brilliant. Can I ask one question actually, Aine? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, Matthew.
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting. You were saying that in many of the countries, once people were, so you used a mixed method approach, and in many countries, once people were aware through the monitoring exercise, it seemed to me they were pleasantly surprised in terms of how much was being used. It seemed like people, you know, it was a lot lower than they expected. And I just wondered if you had any recommendations, and maybe this isn't the report, but I wondered if you had any recommendations around this kind of awareness idea and making people aware. Maybe they're overstating in their own minds how much it uses.
No, absolutely, Matthew, and this is a very good question. And most of the people were surprised how little energy their appliances use. And one of the recommendations that, especially, you know, from a product design perspective, is to show that to people, right? To have that energy monitoring embedded in appliances. Because I also wanted to maybe talk a little bit at the beginning that electricity is intangible, right? So people can touch wood, can touch charcoal, they can even, you know, hug a gas cylinder, but electricity is intangible, and you don't know how much of it they use. So even those households that I mentioned that have prepaid meters, they were not aware of how much electricity they use for cooking, because they also use it for refrigeration, for TV, radio, lighting, and everything. So so yeah, that was really interesting to see, and I think that transparency could be embedded in appliances, and that would definitely boost the usage, and especially the adoption of energy efficient appliances.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're on the hour. We've had a couple of compliments on the presentation and requests for the slides, which is great. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for dialing in. Thank you for so many great questions that have really made both of us think. And yeah, I know we'll follow up with the slides, and you will have a recording of the webcast to kind of go through in more detail at your leisure. So thank you everyone for dialing in. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one in the summer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, Manny.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.